State Department officials said Mr. Tillerson had been warned that something was coming, but he only learned what exactly it was when he read the tweet. President Trump expanded on his reasons a little later, before boarding a helicopter, but not on his timing.
Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he felt it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same. With Mike Pompeo, we have a very similar thought process. I think it's going to go very well.
From the beginning, things didn't go very well for Rex Tillerson. As a senior oil executive, he came into the job with a lot of foreign negotiating experience, but none in government, none with diplomacy. But I thought it would go better than it did. I remember well Mr. Tillerson's first day when nervous State Department employees gathered to hear him. He came across rather well.
Well, my first day's here. I'm on the job. Hi, I'm the new guy. Before President Trump called me, I thought I'd be entering retirement this spring. Renda and I were ready to head off to the ranch and enjoy our grandchildren. But when I came back from my first meeting with President Trump and he asked me to do this, Renda said, "You didn't know it, but you've been in a 41-year training program for this job."
But he turned out to be a poor administrator. Under his watch, there was an exodus of veteran diplomats and expertise. He did better on the diplomacy side, taking an establishment Republican line in crafting policies and ready to counsel against Mr. Trump's more aggressive instincts on issues such as Iran and North Korea. But there was a tension in the relationship between the two very different personalities. That included reports Mr. Tillerson had privately called the president a moron.
Address the main headline of this story, that you called the president a moron, and if not, where do you think these reports or ideas are?
I'm not going to deal with petty stuff like that. I mean, this is what I don't understand about Washington. Again, I'm not from this place, but the places I come from, we don't deal with that kind of petty nonsense.
That was a very low point. But Mr. Tillerson had worked on the relationship since then, and it seemed to be improving. In the end, Mr. Trump chose to replace him with the CIA director, Mike Pompeo, with whom the president has a personal chemistry. Mr. Pompeo may give the State Department more of a profile. He'll work better with the White House and might be a better administrator. But that won't ultimately change the fate of diplomacy under President Trump, says Steve Call. He's an author who's written extensively about Mr. Tillerson. Even before today's announcement, he had this warning.
If he leaves, the politicians who have been mentioned as potential successors are going to come in with, in some respects, more radical foreign policy outlooks than he has, but they're not going to restore the State Department in some way. The role of the State Department and the restructuring that's underway, I mean, it reflects broader consensus in the Trump administration, and at the White House, I think that's likely to endure.
Mr. Pompeo is a hawk on Iran and has spoken belligerently about North Korea. He will work closely now with Mr. Trump on the fate of the Iran deal and the forthcoming historic summit with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But the manner of his rise and the fall of Rex Tillerson has shaken a Washington that was beginning to think Mr. Trump could no longer surprise it. Carolyn.
Barbara Plett-Usher in Washington, thank you very much. Also there, Julie Davis, who covers the White House for the New York Times. And Julie Davis, Rex Tillerson now unexpectedly gets more time to spend with his children, doesn't he? Were you surprised when you saw the president's rather abrupt tweet?
Relationship that was, and some of this had blown over. So while I'm never surprised to see an abrupt move like this from the desire that the president has had for months now to get rid of Rex Tillerson, but the timing was a bit of a surprise because after quite an uptick in sort of November, December in the sort of whispers that Tillerson was going to be out, I thought we had entered a period of relative calm in the relationship between the two. I think from Tillerson's perspective, he's doing his thing and there wasn't going to be any immediate change, and no one was discounting the fact that there had been tensions behind the scenes, but it seemed that they had found sort of a working relationship that was and some of this had blown over. So while I'm never surprised to see an abrupt move like this from the president, I did think that the timing was a bit baffling, and clearly the Secretary of did as well.
Well, as you say, he survived called Donald Trump expletive moron. Yes, the timing is interesting, isn't it? Particularly with the big moment coming up, those talks on North Korea coming soon. I mean, is it wise to ditch your Secretary of State so close to those talks?
Well, I mean, typically no, but the White House had already made it very clear that it didn't see Tillerson playing a very big role run up to that meeting. Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, was asked about that this week, and she sort of discounted that. The president made this pretty abrupt decision to accept Kim's invitation to meet without really consulting him. Rex Tillerson had just made a statement a couple of days previous to that, saying that he didn't think talks were in the offing anytime soon. Of course, he had famously been yanked back by President Trump publicly, again on Twitter, when he had implied last year that, there might be a path toward diplomacy or talks with North Korea. But so the two of them were out of step on that. And while the administration had done a lot of thinking and planning and talking about sanctions and a possible military option, there hadn't been a lot of planning for a diplomatic strategy. Certainly the State Department had not been involved in any robust way in preparing for that possibility. And so that leaves the president without those plans and strategies in the run-up to this very consequential meeting. And of course, the top diplomat who was handling those issues announced he was going to leave the State Department just a couple of weeks ago now. So they are, normally it would be a horrible time to be without your Secretary of State, but this Secretary of State had been sidelined on that issue, it seems, for quite a while.
And the State Department now has to deal with a new man, Mike Pompeo. He's been moved from the CIA to the State Department. What do you make of that appointment? Who is he?
Well, if he's confirmed, he'll be moved. And he obviously has a lot of support, at least from Republicans on Capitol Hill, because he was a member of the House of Representatives. And he has a pretty good reputation, actually, in both parties. He's managed to keep that reputation at the CIA. Mike Pompeo, I think that his number one qualification for this job in the eyes of the president is that he knows him. He delivers his intelligence report. He briefs the president on a near daily basis on threats and developments around the world. The president obviously feels comfortable with him and has a rapport with him, unlike anything he ever had with Rex Tillerson. So in that regard, I think he's much more comfortable with Pompeo. And then obviously in the clip you played, he alluded to the fact that they think the same. They're very hawkish, both of them, on a lot of the big issues like Iran and North Korea.
Julie Davis, thank you. 5:26. The Chancellor Philip Hammond delivered his spring statement earlier.